The air was thick with moisture in the small town of Cedar Creek, tucked into the foothills of western North Carolina. What started as light April showers had turned into a nonstop downpour, flooding roads and turning calm creeks into raging streams. Sarah Miller, a wildlife biologist and part-time professor at the local community college, squinted through the rain streaking down her windshield as she drove home from an unexpected faculty meeting. At 42, Sarah had spent most of her life studying and protecting the area's wild creatures. Her simple house sat just outside town, backed up against a patch of protected forest where she liked to do weekend fieldwork. Her coworkers often joked that she seemed to relate better to animals than people, but Sarah took it as a compliment. Animals, at least, never pretended to be something they weren't. The rain had finally eased up a little, though the sky was still heavy and gray. Sarah slowed her old Subaru as she neared the small bridge over Whispering Creek, now a roaring, muddy torrent filled with floating branches and trash. Something moved near the drainage culvert just off the road, catching her attention. At first glance, it looked like debris, but then she spotted the flash of black wings. A group of crows, 5 or 6, had formed a tight circle, squawking and lunging at something pinned against the metal grate at the culvert's mouth. "What the heck is that?" Sarah muttered, pulling to the side and flipping on her hazard lights. She grabbed her raincoat from the passenger seat and stepped into the light drizzle, blinking against the mist in the air. The crows screeched as she got closer, but only backed off a few feet, clearly not ready to give up whatever they had found. When she saw what it was, Sarah's stomach dropped. Pushed up against the grate and barely keeping its nose above the swirling water was a tiny, soaking wet ball of fur. A bobcat cub. It looked only a few weeks old, its spotted coat slicked flat and clinging to its thin frame. One crow darted in and jabbed the cub's head with its beak. The little thing jerked in pain, but stayed silent, too weak to even cry. Another crow landed beside it, eyeing the helpless cub for a turn. "Hey, get away from there!" Sarah yelled, flailing her arms and charging forward. The bird scattered, squawking in protest, before landing in nearby trees to wait. Sarah dropped to her knees in front of the gutter, not caring that the cold, muddy water was soaking through her jeans. The cub was in awful shape. Its breathing was shallow and uneven, and its head hung at an odd, painful angle. Tiny cuts covered its face and ears, clear signs of where the crows had pecked. One eye was swollen shut, and dried blood clung to the fur around its right ear. "Oh, you poor little thing," Sarah murmured, her trained eye quickly taking in the injuries. It looked like the bobcat had gotten separated from its mother during the storm, swept away by the flood, and left stuck in the drainage where those crows found it. The repeated blows to its head, along with the trauma of the flood, had likely done serious damage. The uneven pupils and tilted head pointed to a possible brain injury. Sarah knew the odds weren't good. Wild animals, especially ones like bobcats, rarely made it after trauma like this. Maybe the kindest thing would be to walk away and let nature decide. But something about the way the little cub kept lifting its head, still fighting to breathe, even as the cold water rushed around it, struck her deeply. A car slowed as it passed, and the driver leaned out. "Everything okay, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes, all good," Sarah replied quickly, moving to block the view of the cub. "Just checking a drainage issue." The car rolled on. A few more passed without stopping. Life went on around them, unaware of the small life-or-death struggle playing out by the roadside. "I can't leave you like this," Sarah whispered at last, gently lifting the soaked cub. It was featherlight, just bones and fur, shaking from fear and the cold. For a moment, its one open eye, the golden one, locked onto Sarah's. It didn't look afraid or angry, just quietly aware that she was there. "I'm going to call you Max," Sarah said softly, tucking the cub inside her jacket. "It means greatest, and that's what you'll have to be to make it through this." The Mountain View Veterinary Hospital was nearly a 30-minute drive, the only place nearby with a wildlife specialist. Sarah used her hands-free system to call ahead, speaking to Dr. Ellen Winters, who had worked with her on past research. A bobcat cub with possible brain trauma, Sarah explained. Ellen's voice crackled through the speaker. "Sarah, you know the chances aren't good." "I know," Sarah said, her eyes on the towel-wrapped bundle she'd laid in a cardboard box. She'd cranked up the heat, trying to warm the cub's freezing little body. But I couldn't leave him there to die like that. Ellen let out a breath. "Bring him in. We'll do our best. But be ready. These cases almost never end well." The clinic was quiet when Sarah arrived, the gloomy weather having scared off most routine visits. Dr. Winters met her at the back entrance, already in gloves, her serious look softening just a bit when she saw how carefully Sarah held the box. "Let's take a look," she said, leading her into an exam room. Under the bright lights, Max looked even worse. His injuries were clearer now as Ellen began her exam, her hands moving fast but gentle. The cub didn't move at all, too weak to fight. "Multiple bites and scratches around the head and neck," Ellen said. "Looks like a serious concussion, maybe even a skull fracture. His temperature's dangerously low, and he's dehydrated. He's also much too small for his age, probably got separated from his mother even before the storm hit." Sarah stood nearby, worry all over her face. "Can you help him?" she asked. Ellen paused. "Normally, we'd sedate him to clean the wounds and check everything properly, but right now, he's just too fragile." "Anesthesia would likely kill him before we could even start," Ellen said. "So we just do nothing?" Sarah asked, her throat tightening. "I didn't say that," Ellen replied gently. "We'll begin with slow warming, fluids to treat the dehydration, and broad-spectrum antibiotics to fight infection from the wounds. If, and it's a big if, he makes it through the night, we'll reassess in the morning." "He's going to need constant monitoring," Sarah said, already thinking through her schedule. Ellen raised an eyebrow. "You're planning to take him home, aren't you? After all my warnings about not getting attached to wild patients." Sarah didn't flinch. "Someone has to watch him. Your overnight staff's already stretched, and I've handled wildlife rehab before." Ellen hesitated, then gave a small nod. "You're right. But Sarah, be realistic. The odds are against him, no matter what we do." "I know," Sarah said quietly, "but he still deserves a chance." 3 hours later, Sarah walked back to her car carrying a small animal carrier. Inside, Max lay unconscious but stable, wrapped in thermal blankets. His wounds had been cleaned and treated, and Ellen had walked Sarah through giving fluids and liquid meds. A box of supplies filled her trunk, special formula for orphaned predators, syringes, antibiotics, and a full care guide. "Call me if anything changes," Ellen had said firmly. "Day or night, and Sarah, don't get your hopes up." The rain had stopped by the time Sarah pulled into her driveway. Water still dripped from the roof of her quiet cabin. Inside, she turned the unused guest room into a makeshift wildlife ICU. She layered soft blankets over a heating pad inside a large plastic storage bin, a temporary space just big enough for Max to shift around if he ever regained the strength. The little cub didn't move when she settled him in. His fur was drying now, but still patchy and dull against the fleece. "You're safe now," Sarah whispered, knowing he couldn't understand, but needing to say it anyway. "Just hang in there, little fighter." The hours crawled by as Sarah kept watch, checking his breathing every 15 minutes and logging each update in a notebook. Twice she gave him fluids, carefully sliding the needle under the skin at his shoulders, just like Ellen had shown her. Each time she held her breath, afraid the pain might be too much for his fragile body. But Max held steady, not better, but not worse. At midnight, Sarah made herself eat a sandwich, though food was the last thing on her mind. She'd already emailed the college to cancel her morning classes. Max wouldn't be left alone, not while his life hung by a thread. By 2 a.m., her eyes burned with exhaustion. She pulled an armchair next to his bin, telling herself she'd just sit for a minute, just to rest while keeping watch. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines, whispering like waves far away. She must have nodded off without meaning to, because when she jerked awake, gray morning light was slipping through the blinds. Her heart lurched. Had she missed something? Had Max slipped away while she slept? But there he was. His tiny chest still rose and fell, slow but steady. And then she saw it, something new. One eye, the good one, was slightly open. A flash of gold peeked out. Sarah moved her hand gently above him. The eye followed it, blurry but aware. "Max," she breathed, barely daring to believe it. He didn't move, but his breathing was just a little stronger than it had been the night before. With cautious hope, Sarah prepared a small dose of the special formula Ellen had given her, drawing it into a needleless syringe. With the utmost care, she lifted Max's head and placed a single drop on his tongue. For a few breathless seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, his throat moved in a weak swallow. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was something. Max had made it through the night, and now he was showing the faintest sign of fighting back. She called Ellen right away. "He's responsive?" Ellen asked, surprised. "And he swallowed some formula? That's better than I expected." "Should I bring him in?" Sarah offered, still nervous about moving him, but willing if it meant a better shot at survival. "If he's stable and reacting, let's not risk stressing him right now," Ellen said. "Keep following the plan: fluids, antibiotics, and feedings every 2 hours if he'll take them. I'll stop by after my last appointment and check him myself." The day passed in a blur. Careful feeding, monitoring, medications. By late afternoon, Max had taken almost 15 milliliters of formula. It wasn't a lot, but it was more than Ellen had hoped for. The swelling around his eye was starting to ease, and though his head still tilted, he seemed more aware, tracking movement and blinking more often. Ellen showed up just after 7 p.m., medical bag in hand. Her guarded expression changed the moment she examined Max. "His temperature's almost back to normal," she said, reading the thermometer. "He's better hydrated. Neurologically, he's still not great, but better than I thought he'd be." "So? He has a chance?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice even. Ellen pulled off her stethoscope and gave a slow nod. "He's still in critical shape, Sarah. But yes, he has a real chance now, a better one than yesterday." Those next 48 hours turned into several days, and then into weeks. The road wasn't smooth. Max had a day where he refused to eat. One night, Sarah rushed him to the clinic after a spell of tremors that left her shaken. Some days he barely moved, and she feared they were losing ground. But then came the wins, small, steady signs of progress. The first time he held his head upright on his own. The morning he swatted her hand away while she cleaned his face, showing just a hint of wild attitude. The day he stood, legs shaky but determined, before sinking back into his bedding. 3 weeks after the rescue, Sarah moved Max from the plastic bin into a bigger setup on her screened porch. It was safe, enclosed, but full of fresh air and daylight. His coat had turned glossy again, and the soft, spotted pattern that marked him as a bobcat stood out clearly now. The wounds on his head had healed, leaving behind a few bare spots Ellen said would grow back with time. The neurological damage hadn't vanished, but it wasn't as bad as they'd feared. His head still leaned to one side, and his balance wasn't great. Sometimes he missed his mark trying to pounce on a toy. But his golden eyes were bright and sharp, following every movement with fierce focus. "He's a miracle," Ellen said during a checkup, watching Max lunge at a feather toy with impressive precision. "I've never seen a wildcat come back from that level of trauma." Sarah smiled, though the question that had been tugging at her for days finally came out. "What now? We both know he can't be released, right?" Ellen nodded, the answer already clear between them. Max wouldn't survive in the wild. His reflexes weren't sharp enough. A bobcat that couldn't hunt flawlessly didn't stand a chance out there. "I've started making some calls," Ellen said, her tone careful. "The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in Asheville might have room," Ellen said. "They've got excellent enclosures for non-releasable native predators, and their education programs are top-notch." Sarah nodded, trying not to focus on the emptiness creeping into her chest. She'd known from the beginning that this moment would come. She couldn't offer a permanent home to a wild bobcat, not legally, not safely, and not in the life she lived, no matter how special Max had become to her. When would they take him, she asked, keeping her voice steady even as her heart squeezed. Next month, Ellen replied. He'll need a bit more strength first, anyway. She placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. You gave him his life back, Sarah. Now it's time to give him the best one possible, even if that means it's not with you. The next few weeks passed with a bittersweet rhythm. As Max grew stronger, Sarah poured herself into helping him prepare for what came next. She kept careful notes for the center's records, and for herself. Her phone filled with short clips, Max awkwardly but excitedly chasing a rolling ball, clambering onto the custom platform she'd made, curled in a warm patch of sun with his paws tucked under his chin. One soft morning in late May, just shy of a month after finding him, Sarah sat cross-legged on the screened porch, watching Max tackle a new puzzle toy. It was a simple box with holes and treats hidden inside, something to spark his curiosity and test his coordination. He was moving more confidently now, though his head still tilted slightly, a quiet reminder of all he'd endured. Out of the corner of her eye, Sarah noticed a flash of movement. A single crow had landed on the deck railing outside. Its sleek black feathers shimmered in the light. She tensed, just for a second, flashing back to the circle of crows by the roadside. But this one was alone, minding its own business, preening calmly. Max noticed it too. His body dropped low, muscles coiled as he locked onto the bird with quiet intensity. The crow, safe behind the screen, remained unaware. Max's golden eyes narrowed. For a few seconds, Sarah didn't see the fragile cub she'd nursed back to life. She saw the wild animal he was born to be, fierce, focused, instinctual. The crow eventually flew off, never knowing how it had sparked something deep in the little bobcat. But Max stayed on high alert, watching the railing like a seasoned hunter. When he finally returned to his puzzle, Sarah felt a wave of emotion, part pride, part sorrow. This was why she had to let him go. Not because she couldn't keep him. She would have changed her entire life if it had been the right thing. But because he deserved more space, more freedom, more of the wild than she could offer. The transfer day came faster than she was ready for. Sarah had prepared everything carefully. The carrier lined with his favorite blanket, a folder with all his medical records, feeding notes, and care instructions. She even wrote a letter to his future caretakers, listing his favorite toys and his quirks. Ellen arrived early to help. She brought a mild sedative to make the ride to Asheville easier for Max. "Are you sure you don't want me to take him?" she asked, watching Sarah check and recheck the carrier one last time. "I know this isn't easy," Ellen said softly. Sarah shook her head. "I need to see where he's going. I need to know he'll be okay." The Blue Ridge Wildlife Center sat on a wide stretch of land tucked into the mountains near Asheville. As Sarah followed the winding road in, she spotted large, natural enclosures along the tree line, homes for animals that, like Max, couldn't return to the wild but now played a role in teaching people about conservation. They were met by Margaret, the center's director, a kind woman with silver hair and decades of experience in wildlife rehab. "We've got a quiet quarantine space ready for young Max," she said, guiding them to a small building away from the main visitor area. "Once he's settled and cleared by our vet, we'd love to include him in our junior ambassador program." She brought Sarah to the enclosure that would become Max's permanent home. It was spacious and thoughtfully built, with climbing logs, hidden corners, and enrichment tools, so much more than what Sarah could offer at her cabin. 2 other bobcats, older and also unreleasable, had similar spaces nearby. "We'll ease him in when he's ready," Margaret explained. "Even bobcats sometimes bond in captivity. It's not uncommon here." The actual goodbye was both more painful and strangely peaceful than Sarah had imagined. Max, still groggy from the sedative, barely stirred as he was moved to the quarantine room. His favorite blanket went with him, something familiar to ease the change. "You're welcome to visit any time," Margaret told her gently. A lot of our rescuers become regular volunteers. Max won't forget you. The drive back felt long. When Sarah reached her cabin, it seemed quieter than ever. She moved through the evening in a daze, packing up Max's things, scrubbing out his enclosure, filing away the notes she'd kept during his care. Ellen had invited her over, worried she'd be alone, but Sarah had declined. She needed the silence. She needed to feel it. As the sky darkened, she sat on her porch, looking out into the forest behind her home. Somewhere out there, wild bobcats roamed freely, hidden from view, living by instinct. Max would never be part of that world again. But he was alive, he was safe, and he had a future, because she'd stopped that day, because she'd chosen to act. A rustle of wings broke the stillness. A crow, maybe the same one as before, maybe not, landed on her railing. Its dark feathers gleamed in the fading light as it tilted its head toward her, curious but calm. This time Sarah didn't tense, she just watched. She thought of the first group of crows and felt no anger now. They hadn't been cruel, they were just doing what they knew, surviving. That was the wild. The miracle wasn't that she had interrupted it. The miracle was what came after. Because of that moment, a new story had begun, one that would teach others to care about the wild creatures around them. The crow flew off, vanishing into the deepening sky. Tomorrow, she'd call the center to check on Max. Next weekend, she'd go see him. And maybe, once the semester ended, she'd volunteer. Her life was changing, but it wasn't ending. For now, she stayed on the porch, listening to the quiet hum of the forest. There was peace in knowing she was part of something bigger than herself, the tangled, harsh, and beautiful web of life that had brought a small, struggling cub and a tired wildlife biologist together on a rainy day. Max's journey wasn't finished. In so many ways, it was just beginning.